All right, guys, welcome to Contrarian Daily Podcast. We're going to be talking a little bit today about Russia and Ukraine, a little bit what's happening, because I feel like it's fizzling out a little bit. They say that there's a 2-week news cycle with all major stories, but this is something that I think requires our prolonged attention. So, Chris Jong, welcome to the podcast, my friend. And my name is
Hello.
And we're going to be spitballing a bit. How are you today, mate?
Yeah, very well, mate. Very well. Obviously, we're starting a little bit later than usual here. So I know you've had a big day and I've had just a normal day. I wouldn't say it's been extra hectic, but it's been just full of normal work. So I definitely don't think the Ukraine situation's cycling down, but definitely the media coverage of it does appear to be. So
that's what I mean. I mean the news cycle, as in the mainstream narrative on it. People do get bored after a little while, and we saw this with obviously Afghanistan earlier in the year. It was in the news for a few weeks, and people were praying for the Afghanis for a little while, and then after that, just fizzles out. So I don't think the same will happen here, because I think that there's obviously the existential threat within the West, and because of these are two nuclear powers going at it. So
I actually think it's an intentional thing. Like the powers that be, the elites, know that their attention span will fizzle out and they get overwhelmed and things like that. So they intentionally, they know they can launch something. It'll get a couple of weeks worth of coverage and maybe a bit of bad press, but then after that, they're on to the next thing and the next thing, and that allows them to keep on driving away at their agenda behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess there has been a few updates, and one of the things that is quite notable is that I think the first or second time that we ever talked about this a few weeks back, I floated the idea that I think that Putin might start really rubbling cities, like really taking a heavy-handed approach to it, because he was a little bit more cautious at the start and it was a bit more strategical. But then as the resistance kept on happening, and as they obviously couldn't take Kiev and it was a bit embarrassing on the world stage, I thought that they might start rubbling cities and rubbling buildings, et cetera, et cetera. And you have seen a little bit of that happening now, the more heavy-handed sort of tactics.
Yeah, they're definitely escalating. My thinking, as time's gone on, is that this is actually all part of the whole Great Reset, because I remember you said on the very first podcast as well, like, why aren't they cutting all the communications? Why aren't they really going in hard? And they really weren't going in hard at all, really. And I know Putin's been accused of putting in his B team in terms of the military force.
Right.
But the thing that's really been interesting for me is seeing obviously the sanctions, but the private company responses of all the big companies around the world. A lot of them are partners of the World Economic Forum and things like that, and how they've basically been cutting off supplies or pulling out of Russia and cutting off service to Russian citizens around the world, no matter where they are, no matter who they are and what their views are. And my view is that they're using this to get us used to this as a tool to be used against people. So right now it's being used against the Russian population because Russia bad, Ukraine good. In terms of their word. But then, as people get used to these things being used, then it can turn back onto, like anti-vaxxers, as they label people. They're bad, this is good, so therefore we should cut off their services. And I know in the European Union, there's been talk about, I should say, in their parliament, about using sanctions on individuals. And so they're talking about right now, like sanctioning individuals who are spreading Russian misinformation and things like that. And again, it's moving towards getting everyone used to the likes of Coca-Cola, McDonald's, all these different companies that are either no longer serving Russians or will no longer service Russians, getting everyone used to that whole fact. So then it's going to be used on whoever they don't like next week.
Well, yeah, the idea of sanctioning individuals, I mean, who gets to decide? That's the big issue, isn't it? Who gets to decide what people are doing that's so sanctionable? I mean, we already have a legal system, and if somebody's not breaking the law, then they should be able to be punished within the judiciary system, right? So if they're not breaking the law, then I guess we're going to sanction bad ideas, we're going to sanction information, we're going to sanction who you hang out with, and then the slippery slope just sort of unveils right before your eyes.
Slippery slope is the perfect way to describe it, because basically they've been censoring misinformation, and that's been bad enough. But then, next step from censoring is actively going after people and sanctioning, and those sorts of things too. The other thing that's been really interesting is I believe it's the USA has seized all of the Russian assets that were held in the USA as well. So, in terms of their deposits and things like that. And so if they can do that to a global, I guess, nuclear superpower, they can definitely do it to people. And we've seen that with the Canadian truckers, in terms of the Canadian government freezing bank accounts and things like that.
Yeah.
And now they've just gone on and seized the assets of Russian companies, and I believe also like their yachts and things like that. Any Russian-owned assets have just been seized, and they can't access it. So
Hunter Biden's going to have a field day with that.
He will, won't he? I know. Well, then again, maybe his business from the Ukraine isn't going so well right now. So,
yes,
it could be a two-edged sword.
Yeah, but he'll be in the siege yard. What do they call it? Where they seize all of the materials, and Hunter Biden will be there with his crack pipe.
That's true. That's right. Yeah, in the impound lot.
In the impound lot, exactly. A couple of yachts.
That's it. Maybe they'll find a few extra keys of drugs or something hidden away in the yacht. Things as a bonus or something like that as well. Who knows?
Won't make the news. Won't make the news though, unfortunately.
No, not at all.
Another thing I've been finding really interesting is the idea of the no-fly zone with America and Ukraine. And I was listening to Tucker talk about it today. And the idea of the no-fly zone is obviously that Russian planes can't fly in certain spaces. And then if they were to if they were to not honor that no-fly zone, then you'd have to shoot down the planes, obviously. It would obviously be a direct incitement to war against Russia. If you take down their planes, obviously they have to respond, and then you can see how it unfurls from there. And then it's also very interesting that the two sides of things, because on one hand you want to be putting all of the sanctions on Russia, et cetera, but on the other hand, that's could be a direct provocation of war, and there's a bit of a debate rumbling about that at the moment.
Yeah, big time. Well, I think also Estonia is the first NATO country that will actually actively call for the no-fly zone, officially as well. But I think also the other thing too is there has been a couple of Russian incursions. I believe it was in Japan or Japanese in their air, and also I think it's in Finland or Finnish or whatever. There's been a couple of Russian planes flying around those locations as well, which they're not direct no-fly zones, but they're definitely a NATO country territory in terms of. Well, actually, no, they're not, because Finland's not part of NATO, I don't believe. But they're other countries, sovereign airspace, and so there has been a few incursions there too.
Yeah, and then there's also the case of the fact that USA are going to be arming Zelensky. I think Zelensky came and presented a case for USA to arm Ukraine, which, it's fair enough, and that's a fair enough thing to ask because they do need weapons, etc. But is that also a direct incitement of war against Ukraine by the US, saying we're going to arm them with all of these weapons? And the more you think about it, the less you can find a positive solution to what's happening.
Yeah, correct. And when you say war, I know you mean like a hot war, like a military war, but there are different levels of warfare. There's information war, there's financial war or economic warfare. There's all sorts of different warfare, and I would argue that we've been at war with not necessarily Russia, but with China, and I guess to a lesser degree with Russia in terms of economic warfare and information war for quite some time. So this is the next level up, and definitely ratcheting that whole tension up. But again, I think looking at it again just through the lens of the greater situation where we're at in terms of the I know I'm very, very obsessed with the Great Reset, but I do look into that quite a lot. But it does make a lot of sense, and it plays into that quite a lot. You've got again, we've discussed this a few times, where even in WWF or WCW, like wrestling or whatever it is, you've got to have bad guys that people love to hate. And I believe that Putin is that thing, as I'm seeing more of what's going on. Because obviously you look at all the oil stuff that's going on, and then Biden's been able to blame Putin and Russia for all the rising inflation and things like that. And again, it does play into the part when you combine it with the commercial companies' responses. Then you look at the USA potentially sending arms and all those bits and pieces in there too. It does tie into this moving in that direction in terms of them having their Great Reset. And again, like I said, there is no positive way out of this, I don't think. Because the other thing too that's happening, which I was thinking about today, there's I think happened like 1 million Ukrainian citizens or civilians being displaced, and they're now refugees or somewhere around that figure, and they're looking at housing them. In the UK, they're trying to get average everyday people to house Ukrainian refugees in their houses, and they're going to pay them £350 per month to do so. That's a big commitment, and that's for 6 months. They got to commit to 6 months. So there's a few things with this, right? The first thing is, that's never happened before, as far as I know, right? They've never had civilians and citizens try to house refugees before. They've always put them into different camps and things like that. The second thing is, I can't remember where I saw it, but it's come out that up to 20 to 30% of these refugees aren't even from Ukraine. They're from like Iraq and maybe Nigeria or something like that. And always, they're not actual Ukraine, civilians or refugees. The third thing is, do you remember that video where it says, the 2030 plan, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy?
Yes.
I think it was step or prediction number 5. It's either 4 or 5. That said there's going to be 1 billion people displaced, right, by climate change, by the climate crisis, and we have to get better at, getting used to working with refugees. Right now, 1 billion people is a lot of people. So you think about this, perhaps again in this whole context, they're using this as a way to get people used to taking in refugees, because 1 million to 1 billion is a big difference. And the next 8 years, they're predicting 1 billion people are going to be displaced by climate emergency or climate change as refugees. So we need to get better at handling the refugee situation. And again, this strange act, right? And I think there's even been talk in Europe of seizing people's investment homes and investment properties to use as refugee shelter.
Right.
That's never been done before. Yeah, let me just see if I can find this. Actually, here it is.
I can't think of anything like that ever happening.
No, I can't. So here, I've actually got it here. Let me just share my screen. I've got this on YouTube.
Yeah, go for it.
Let me just share the screen here. And let me know. The audio probably isn't as important, but let me just set myself up here so I can see everything here. So let me see if it's going to scroll down to the actual article in here. Right, so this one here. So you see this thing down here is if more than 100,000 Ukrainians come to the Netherlands, it may even be a question of sequestering suitable property or locations to provide accommodation. He told the program. Now that's going to be coming from people who have investment properties.
Right. Or holiday homes.
Or holiday homes. Yeah, where was that?
No, it doesn't say that, but I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah, holiday homes and investment properties, right? So, and obviously sequestering is the removal of property. So obviously it won't be a permanent removal. It'll be just a temporary one.
Of course, that's what they tell you.
Yeah, of course, that's right, exactly. Well, there's always the government powers never go away. But see, like even the talk of this, right? Sequestering these properties for refugees, and there's 100,000, going to the Netherlands apparently is what they're expecting. This has never happened before in terms of refugee situations. Like, it just doesn't happen. And so, and the UK, they're again paying citizens £350 per month to do this. It's very, very strange.
It is strange, and it's a strange, use of tax dollars as well, because I'm sure that there'd be lots of people in the UK who would be, lower class. And having lived in the UK for 3 years, I lived in London for 3 years. I know that it's social mobility is quite difficult in the UK.
100%.
Oftentimes people do get stuck in the rent trap, because in London, rent is so expensive. I remember I was paying about £600 a month, which is equivalent to like $1,200 a month. And that was half of my wage every week going straight to my rent. And then it's nearly impossible to save. So they have a lot of issues of their own, and a lot of issues with multiculturalism over there as well.
100%. 100%. And then
if I were the UK and I'd be thinking, hey, why don't you invest in your people first before you start investing in Ukrainians?
Not only that, but like you think about all the politicians and the wealthy people over there who are calling for this war and who are supporting it. I'm sure they've got multiple properties and the means for this, but where are they opening up, for this? They're not taking people in. It's kind of like,
I don't see Barack Obama's big place in Margaret's Vineyard or whatever they call it.
No, well, what about all the rooms in Edinburgh Castle with the Queen and stuff? But even with the USA, like the guys who are advocating for the open borders and things like that with Mexico, with the celebrities, they've all got plenty of properties, but they never open up. But they want everyone else to do it, just not them. So
I think that it's really easy for a really rich person to be a socialist. Like whenever I heard Jim Carrey say it on some talk show. He goes, "We need to stop being so scared of the word socialism." I was like, "Oh, do we now?" That's easy for you to say, Jim Carrey. Try to say that to someone from like one of the Slavic countries.
I believe they call them champagne socialists.
Yes, exactly. Seth Rogen's another one. He's
he's a
shocker.
big one. Yeah,
he's a shocker. He's always postulating on the behalf of the disenfranchised and the poor, and he's just like one of the richest guys. Like,
correct. Why doesn't he share some of that wealth with everyone else?
Pay more tax. If you want to pay more tax, pay more tax, my man. You can pay all the tax.
Make donations. There don't even need to be tax. You can just donate.
Yes, exactly right.
So and then
lots of places where you could make a difference.
Definitely. Well, the other thing. Sorry.
Much easier to say it though.
It is, and look like you're virtuous. Virtue signaling as always. One thing actually that we might get into maybe in tomorrow's episode is the BLM donations. Speaking of donations, like there's been tens of millions of donations going into the BLM movement that basically is proven to be a fraud. Yeah, it's gone missing, hasn't been used, and now there's actually no one, quote unquote, leading the organization either. And Glenn Beck put out a great video today about this, which I watched, which I'll probably do it tomorrow just so we can dig into it a bit more. Really just tracking down, following the money, following all the donations, and the Clintons are involved. Surprise, surprise. Involved. Yeah. So they are. Yeah, and like there's a lot of stuff that's crazy. It basically just goes to show that BLM was like proven a Democrat political movement and organization. Wow. Yep, and run by Marxists, as we know. Yep. It was pretty insane. So if you're
Marxists, they call them
trained Marxists.
I believe one of them bought a few mansions, and then they had a conference, I think, like a BLM conference, which is obviously super sort of important business going on there, where they went to like a luxury villa, a luxury hotel, and just sort of like spent the house down with all of the donations.
Oh, they always do. Yeah, 100%. And look, Glenn Beck made the important point too. You can't speculate that they bought these mansions from the donations, because at the same time they also got lucrative contract deals with Hollywood and these other different things in consulting fees. So it might have come from that, but all those things only came about because they were in charge of this whole BLM movement and things. And yeah, it's pretty disgusting. The other part of it is the percentage of the donations that actually get through to the people who need it. So far, it's like virtually 0% because it just hasn't gotten through. But I believe there's like these different clearing houses they got to go through over there, like to be sponsored as an official charity. They take, I think, 10-15% of the donations. So I think it's like by the time it all washed out, 30% of the donations are going to these big elites and things like that anyway. And then, yeah, so it's a whole mess. But
it is a whole mess. And I remember I wrote an article about this a few years ago about BLM itself, and I was very critical of the movement because of obviously its ideological alignment and et cetera, and all the things we're talking about now. And this is right in the middle of the George Floyd thing. So it was when the iron was really hot. And I got a lot of flack from it. And I remember someone very close to me who is of African descent as well was trying to give me shit and trying to in my comments and that sort of stuff. I remember saying to him, mate, if I were you, I'd be more pissed off than I am about this, because you've got 100%. Something that is actually an issue. And then you've got something that you're very passionate about, which is the issue of racism. And then you've got these people who are race hustlers who are making millions off of this issue and pretending to care about it and pretending to make a much bigger fuss about things than it really is. And then getting all of these donations and buying mansions about it. And you're pissed off that I'm calling them out about it? I'd be pointing my finger somewhere else. But that's the problem, isn't it? Like Occupy Wall Street. They're pointing their finger at the wrong people. Don't occupy Wall Street, occupy Washington,
Correct. Well, the other thing too, Tom McDonald had a really great line in one of his songs that, BLM or race, I think it was, but BLM only matters once every 4 years, right? In the political, in the election cycle, because the whole thing with BLM is they wanted to really defund the police. And at the time, the Democrats were all for it, but just literally within a month, in the State of the Union, Biden was pushing for funding the police, not defunding the police, And then where's the outrage?
Amazing how the tides turn, isn't it?
Correct. But then where's the big movement? Where is all the protests and the riots about this? As far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, people out there in the internet, things haven't changed that dramatically in the USA in terms of what BLM was wanting. They haven't achieved all their goals and all that sort of stuff. And so if they haven't achieved all their goals and in fact have a president calling to fund the police again, shouldn't they be back out there in the streets? But no, it's because their people are in power. So
yeah, it's the Democrats who want to make the noise, and it's very sad. But these things are organized from top down, and once again, if the media is making a huge ruckus of it, and if the whole world is just falling at the feet of this movement, okay, well, if this is good for the elites, then they'll let it play in the media cycle. These things don't, like the things that we're talking about here, they don't get out because people don't talk about them, except for if like people like us are talking about them, and it's word of mouth, and it's Chinese whispers in a way sometimes. So the issue of the Canadian truckers, for example, and I remember showing my mum the Canberra protest a few months ago, and she couldn't believe it. I said, "Yeah, there's like 100,000 people there just in Canberra, outside Canberra House," and she's like, I didn't know a thing about it, and I said, turn off Channel 7 and the project. You know what I mean? Like you won't hear about it.
No, legacy media, they're definitely the mouthpiece of the government, massively, which is a real shame. And yeah, it's terrible. I was just going to also talk about just with do you remember all the companies donating money, Nikes and lots of stuff, donating millions of dollars to the thing. At the time, it didn't really make much sense, apart from the fact that they're probably just trying to kowtow to the woke mob. But again, bringing it back to the Great Reset, call me obsessed, but it makes a lot more sense now, because that at the time they're trying to get their reputation score with the ESG, right, and then moving towards that whole thing. So if you didn't do that, you would be frowned upon, and your reputation in this whole thing would take a big hit. So I think that's also just again just moving it towards that end goal, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that if you did connect the dots, and I'm sure somebody's done it out there, the mainstream media, the legacy media would all have connections to the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I believe so.
Someone's done it. Someone's connected the dots.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you even look at the supposed journalist that was berating Boris Johnson, remember, from the UK about the no-fly zone, and then she was from the World Economic Forum. We covered that, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had her name up on the World Economic Partners thing, and then the articles in the news about her saying that she was actually a journalist, but no, she's not a journalist. And so yeah, there's plenty of that going on for sure. Yeah, which is pretty bad. One thing actually we might want to have a look at just quickly is a little clip from Joe Biden about him trying to explain the cause of inflation, or the fact that inflation doesn't seem to come from government spending and printing of money. Let's have a look at this. And again, let me know if you can hear this one, because this one we will want to hear the clip.
Yeah.
So let's just see if you guys can hear it.
Very, very soft.
Okay, hold on. What I'll do is I'll just unclip this one here and come back to it. He's an angry man in this one.
We have to talk about it. Sick of this stuff. We have to talk about it because the American people think the reason for inflation is government spending more money. Simply not true. Well, I don't know about you, but I took it.
Yeah, well, I don't know about you either.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
It's insane. It's absolute insanity. And not only is it insane, it is lies, right? So inflation, anyone who does any sort of basic economic thing, is inflation basically is you've got more money or currency in the supply and the same number of goods, right? And so this is essentially the Federal Reserve. This is them printing money. So look at this. They've obviously been increasing the money supply and things like that over time, but in 2020 or 2021 or whatever it is, they printed, look at just how that line's shot up, and it's continued to move up as well. So this is what's called the M1 money supply, which for those of you who want to learn into that a little bit, from Investopedia, the M1 money is how, here we go here. It's the money supply metric most frequently utilized by economists to reference how much money is in circulation in the country, right? So this is basically what the M1 money supply means. And so, I think I was saying yesterday or whenever we did our last podcast together that 80% of all US dollars has been printed in the last 2 years. This is the visual graph of that. And then all of a sudden, the reason for inflation is because of Russia and Putin. And then you got old mate Angry Joe over here. He's simply sick of this. He says that the American population thinks that inflation comes from government spending, and I guess to a degree, you could argue there's a kernel of truth in that, because it's not really the spending that does the inflation; it's the printing of all the money and all the extra money. So, but it's blatant misdirection, blatant
But that's
lying.
what people have been saying the whole time. It's the printing of money and the massive amounts of money that have been extra money that have been poured in that's devalued the currency. I mean,
Correct.
it's not rocket science.
Correct. And the thing is as well, like this is where I'm actually working on a video to do for the contrarian here, like a more set piece video, I guess. It's not just a live, which is all about this whole money supply and how they change the rules and all those bits and pieces there as well. So, you know, realistically in any economy as we know it, when inflation goes up, they usually raise the interest rates to try to slow down the economy, right? That, you know, I think in Australia, the target was like, I think 3%. So if inflation goes above 3%, they raise interest rates and that's meant to slow down the economy. It's meant to incentivize people to save their money because they get better interest rates in the banks and things like that. And this is what happened back in the 80s, I think it was. Mum tells me all the time. I wasn't alive at this time, but interest rates were in the 12%, 13%,
Wow,
which is unfathomable. Yeah, 100%. Well, you know, maybe 10 years ago. Yeah, well, 10 years ago, interest rates were around 7, 8, 9%, you know, back in the day. And now they've been close to zero all this time. So the reason why I bring this up is because what my view is the elites have had this system in place, right? Through Bretton Woods, where basically they took money off the gold supply and they've been playing the game with the system. And then now they're broken, and it comes to the point where the system's breaking down. The game they've been playing is breaking down. So they're not going to just play by the rules of the game. They're going to change the rules of the game, and that's exactly what they've been doing here. So instead of actually trying to responsibly pay down debts, right, and that's something that's been growing in Australia and pretty much all around the Western world all this time, they're going to try to change the system, hence the Great Reset. And part of that is what they're calling modern monetary theory or monetary policy 3. And so what this basically means is instead of using interest rates and taxes to try to pay down the debts, that basically they can keep on printing money because they're the ones that pay the debt off themselves. So because the US dollar is the reserve currency, when they borrow money, they're borrowing that money in US dollars. And because they can print US dollars, they can print the money to pay that the loan repayments. And in theory, this allows them to continue borrowing money forever, right? According to them. But there's obvious consequences of this, one of them being inflation. And again, they're changing the rules of how this all works. And I'll explain all this in the video that I do for this. But it's crazy that Biden thinks that the average person doesn't even know that inflation comes from an increase in money printing. Well,
unfortunately, our education systems aren't really the best at understanding real world issues or explaining real world issues to people. I mean,
that's very, very true.
I left school not knowing a thing about how the world worked. Had to fully educate myself about everything. I even went to university, studied business, and I had some teacher who was just sitting there drawing graphs all the time. And I was like, I was in an economics class. I passed just, but I was like, I did not learn anything about economics. I remember
that's scary.
About like a pineapple, and like I remember a little bit about supply and demand, and that's about it. And then I go and read some Thomas Sowell, and I go and listen to some Thomas Sowell, and listen to guys like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro who can break it down a little bit better and talk about it in English for the layman. And I started to understand economics a little bit better. But unfortunately, school is just so linear in the way that they teach things and so entrenched and archaic.
Yeah, it's actually pretty scary how not just school but universities as well. I wouldn't even say it's not even equipping people to survive at life. It's de-equipping them to survive at life. It's doing them damage, and it's teaching ideology more than it's actually teaching anything useful and of value. So, and like I said, you can learn all the stuff that you used to learn at universities online for free and also very, very quickly and more effectively.
Definitely.
And it's a reflection of definitely how the education system is. One thing, do you want to go over the Chinese lockdown video as well, the Squid Games video?
Yes. Look, I'm lost for words about this video. I mean, obviously this video has come out of China, and it's this bizarre little dance that they're doing. It almost looks like something straight out of Squid Games, which is what we were laughing at before. But it's a little, what do they call it? The bunny rabbit dance?
Yeah, something like that. We'll get it up, and I'll take the headphones out so we can get the audio coming through. Let's see how this goes. It only goes for less than a minute.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Like I just look at that with absolute disgust at those people.
I looked at that and I think,
yeah.
It'll be a cold day in hell before you get me doing the bunny hop dance. In
Yeah,
my
100%. And
COVID outfit. That is got to be total brainwashing, because
it is. It's
unless
like a
these people
cult.
are all like, they know that dance like the back of their hand, left, right, and they were in there.
Yeah, 100%.
Like,
it's like a cult.
I didn't see one person put a foot wrong the whole time.
No, I think there's one guy at the end down the bottom here who puts his right foot up when the other when he should have put his left foot up or whatever.
Haven't you watched it a few times?
Oh yeah, I have. I've scrutinized it, mate. You know.
Puts you to sleep at night, eh? Left,
Well, no, it gives me nightmares, this stuff. Because this is the sort of stuff of nightmares. Like, it's just these people who are really, they're enforcing lockdowns here. You know, they're going around and giving tests and giving food and things like that. But it's enforcing a tyranny of freedom. And then they've got this real childlike, happy music, and they've got to do this little cult-like thing. It is disgusting, and it's also terrifying. And again, like I said, I just feel complete disgust towards all these people in this thing and the whole process and situation. Because I'll just go back to the start of that. This is because 30 million people, right, in 13 cities in China have been put back into lockdown. And these are the people who are out there going and giving them food and you know, serving tests and all those other bits and pieces. And they're being brainwashed into thinking that they're good, you know, good, decent people and health, you know, happy and
helping the party.
Yeah, because they're helping with 30 million. That's more than our entire population here in Australia in lockdown again in China right now in 13 cities. And these guys here think they're doing the right thing and being brainwashed with this sort of they're making children out of everyone, right? That people aren't.
It's all good because we do the little dance at the start, which lifts.
That's right. Spirit. That's it. Yeah, it's all good, and we can feel good about ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
It's
dubbed the Great Whites, the COVID-19.
Great Whites, that's right. So that they've got a patrol.
Whites.
So patrol, right? So
can you imagine that? As it just attaches purpose unfair.
Well, that's extremely racist, just by the way. That's extremely racist, you know.
I know.
There's nothing great about whites. Guys, there's nothing great about whites.
Exactly. The suits that they're wearing as well. I mean, the Great Whites with these big white suits on, and all they need is a pointy hat, and then it'll be.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. That's exactly right. But look at this, though. Like their tasks include patrolling, right? So obviously they're delivering goods and they're carrying out COVID tests. Okay, cool. But patrolling, what does that mean? They obviously are patrolling for people who are breaching or breaking these lockdowns. And what are they going to do with those people? I'm assuming they either call law enforcement or whatever it is, but it's just so childlike, and it's terrifying because I can see this happening over here in Australia very, and everywhere around the world, because people will buy into this sort of stuff and do this social conditioning.
Okay, because they're Great Whites, you know, they're Great Whites, and they do the little dance, so they can patrol and stuff. But yeah, they're great.
That's right.
They do the dance, so it's fine.
I wonder what the US version of that would look like, actually, because they can't be white. They have to be all in black, right? Because there's obviously black over in the USA.
Then that's cultural appropriation.
Well, there's cultural appropriation. They'll look like the Darth Vader and that sort of stuff from the Sith Lords from Star Wars. So
I don't know.
Yeah, interesting to see what they do there. Yeah.
Anyway,
no, that was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's always these sorts of crazy little videos coming out, but yeah, I think that's pretty good, Chris, for like a bit of an update about what's happening over there and a bit of a spitball, and then some of the other insane things that are happening around the world, and inflation and BLM. So, mate, another day in the office of the world.
It is. And guys, make sure you do subscribe to us, because we will be releasing more of these like set piece videos. I don't know what the right word is for them, but they're pre-recorded. We're actually going to be organizing our thoughts and putting them together into really well thought out and constructed arguments, and also action items for you guys to follow. So make sure you do subscribe so you get notified when we do drop these as well, because knowing social media and big tech, they're not going to be pushing our videos out there. So unless you are subscribed or actively seek us out, then it's very likely or very unlikely you'll see the videos. And they're going to be full of not only education and information, but also what you can do about it, because that's, I think, the thing I'm most passionate about. I know Jake as well. Is there's all this information coming out there about what's going on, but what can we do about it as individuals and as groups? So we're going to be focusing a lot of that content on that as well.
Looking forward to it. Well, we'll keep you guys updated. And thank you so much for joining us again. And once again, Contrarian Daily, get informed, get involved, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, bye for now.
Take care, guys.